whenever you have a situation like that, the question is, where are the roads going to be built and who gets to build the roads? And if you think about that, it's always going to be decided politically, isn't it? And it was here. The WPA became the political arm of the Democratic Party. If you wanted to get a WPA project in your district, you had to have favor with Franklin Roosevelt or key people in the Democratic Party. Let me read to you here. V.G. Copeland, the Democratic County Chairman of Indiana, explained his opinion clearly. What I think will help is to change the WPA management from top to bottom. Put men in there who are in favor of using these democratic projects to make votes for the Democratic Party. James Doherty from New Hampshire, a Democratic Party leader, agreed. Quote, "It is my personal belief that to the victor belong the spoils, and that Democrats should be holding most of those WPA positions so that we might strengthen our fences for the 1940 elections." One WPA director in New Jersey, who I ran across, answered his office telephone, Democratic headquarters. The two were so indistinguishable that that's the way he did it. Democratic Congressman Frank Towey of New Jersey said this in one of his speeches. He was speaking in Newark, New Jersey. He said, in this county, there are 18,000 people on the WPA. With an average of 3 per family, you have 54,000 potential Democratic votes. Can anyone beat that if it is properly mobilized? And he said this in his speech, just very open. So what we see here is the WPA being used as the political vehicle of the Democratic Party. I guess when we look at the Republicans trying to run against this in 1936, it was a disaster. Franklin Roosevelt carried 46 out of 48 states, channeling WPA projects left and right where they were needed in key places. Senator Carter Glass of Virginia said this. He's a Democratic senator. He said this: the 1936 elections would have been much closer had my party not had a $4,800,000,000 relief bill as campaign fodder. So there we had that. And I might also add, it wasn't just the WPA that became a partisan political program. Roosevelt said, what am I going to do to carry western states? Because they don't have very much farming. And the WPA is not as active out there. And he said, why don't we give a subsidy for silver? Silver miners at that time were getting 40 cents an ounce for silver. Roosevelt signed the Silver Purchase Act, which gave them 64.5 cents an ounce for every ounce of silver. So now it's like a subsidy to those western states. We took but of course there was huge overproduction because we were getting above market prices. In fact, we had Americans would go abroad and buy silver at 40 cents and come over here and dump it on the government at 64.5. Mexico was a major silver producing country, and we had to have border guards to catch people trying to smuggle silver at different points in the country. We had, 6 years after this act, 42,000 tons of silver in various stockpiles in or around Washington, D.C. Some of it was in different mints, San Francisco, Denver, and Philadelphia. But we had 42,000 tons of silver. Anybody could say, why do we have 42,000 tons of silver stored that we paid above market price for? The answer, 6 western silver states that Roosevelt carried every single time he ran for president. This helps, I think, to explain the problem that you get into logically here, which is, if all of these programs I'm telling you are bad, and didn't work and added to the national debt. How come Roosevelt keeps getting reelected, right? Answer, because all of the spending was it was carefully targeted to key political areas, and then you get the vote afterward. General Motors, for example, say that President Knudsen, who was president of General Motors in the 1930s, had to lay off 30,000 people. Those 30,000 people might be half Democrat, half Republican. Once they're laid off, and Roosevelt gets a bunch of them on the WPA, they're not half and half anymore. People on the WPA tended to be about 90% Democrat. Once you get people out of private industry and on to government relief, the chances of gaining the Democratic vote are substantially increased. I'm not saying Roosevelt didn't want recovery, but I'm saying we have an odd situation where the incentives were the higher the unemployment, the more potential he had to get Democratic votes. An odd predicament in US history. My final word, and then I'll open it here to questions, and that is, whenever you see a discussion of the New Deal, except for my book, there's never much on taxes. When I went through a PhD program at the University of Pittsburgh, it was in American economic history. I could not have told you what the tax rate was or how we got the tax revenue to spend for the New Deal. But that's absolutely, if you think about it, imperative, isn't it? Because you have an image that the New Dealers create of long lines of unemployment before Roosevelt, then all these people building roads and doing these jobs afterwards. But to complete the picture, you have to look at all the money going out of other people's pockets through taxes to put those people into those jobs. Because that money could have been spent in the private sector to create jobs as well. Therefore, it's important to know something about it. President Roosevelt raised taxes on the top of the wealthy people in 1935 to a top rate of 79%. Almost 4 out of every 5, that's marginal rate, which is at the top. It's obviously much less than that on low-income people. Roosevelt then increased taxes to over 80% in the early 40s. In 1942, he raised the income tax by he proposed an income tax of 99.5% on all income over $100,000. So if you earn $200,000 on your second $100,000, by the way, you got taxed heavily on your first $100,000 too, but not 99.5. On your second, you get 99.5. How much would you get to keep if you made $200,000? How much of that second $100,000 would you get to keep? 5,000. Is that right?
400.
And so it said $5. It's in between, right? 500. So imagine you're making $200,000 a year. On the second 100, now the first 100,000 you send about half of it to the government because it's progressive all the way up. On the second 100,000, you keep 500 and you send 99,500 to the government. Even the budget director was appalled. Roosevelt was angry. It was turned down by Congress. And he responded, it was no more Mr. Nice Guy. He passed, during World War II, an executive order to tax top incomes. Here's the tax rate. A 100% tax rate on all income over $25,000. And you might say, how could he do that legally? He said this way: an executive order is to enforce the laws of the land. Congress declared war on Japan and on Germany, and this is to raise money for the war. Therefore, it's an executive order. It's legal and binding.